Now, here friends, we come up to the second part of unit number 3, the B part, that is your employee communication. Now, in this employee communication, you are going to cover up the introduction, sources of employee communication, organizing employee communication, benefits of employee communication, steps in implementing effective employee communication, and the role of management and employee communication. Now, exactly what is employee communication? Employee communication is often defined as the sharing of information and ideas. I said sharing of information and ideas between whom? Between the management of an organization and the employees of the organization and the management. So it's a two-way communication. That's why I said vice versa. It is essential for an organization's success that there are many different channels available to communicate with your employees as well as with your customers. Now you find out, let us see what are the sources of these communication. Now when I talk about sources of communication, we come across the formal sources of communication and the informal sources of communication. Now, the formal communication is a communication through predefined channels set by the organization. They are typically conveyed from the top leadership to the various departments that funnel down to the lower employees. It is backed by organizational procedure and it is necessary to fulfill the goals of the organization. Formal organizations are legal. They are recognized. They can be written, such as emails or posted notice. They can be verbal, usually undiscussed in departmental meetings. Formal communication is the information that flows upward, downward, or horizontally throughout the organization. Now, this takes place in a framework of authority and rules as well as the policies. It also includes the diagonal interaction such as the matrix communication that takes place within project teams, boards, committees and task forces. Now, what are these sources of employee communication? There are 8 sources what I have given to you. The cell phones, the emails, the instant messages, the meetings, workshops and conferences, webinars, case studies, articles, newsletters. These are all the formal sources of communication. Then you come up to the informal source of communication. Now, informal communication flows in any direction. It generally does not follow the organization structure. Informal organization can take place between all levels and at all areas of the organization. Usually, informal work relationship create a bond between the workers and helps teams become more cohesive. Frequently, workers enjoy the time they spend at the office more. Why? Because of the informal relationship and informal communication that results. In addition to useful information, informal communication is used to carry rumors and gossips. Sometimes not considered as positive, rumors are fact of life in the workplace, and most workers engage in some form or the other of this type of communication. Now you find what are the informal sources. One is the online discussion forum. Active online discussion forum where members get advice from industry experts on share feedback on tactics and tools. Member only directory. This directory is made for new contacts with the employees. LinkedIn. This is to link up with other members in the employee communication section to see what topics and trends your peers are currently chatting about. The Facebook. This is done to put up a face to the name with PRSA, employee communication. We have the communication Facebook. Then we have the Twitter. This is what putting the latest industry news and events for the employee engagement and internal communication. And last one, we have the blogging. Blogging about what? Blogging about the latest trends and issues. How are you going to organize employee communication? Now, employees significantly influence the outcome of any work project. If you communicate strategically with the purpose, you are more likely to see all of your employees working with a common purpose towards shared organizational goals. So, effective employee communication allows everyone to stay informed and work towards the shared organization goals. What are the steps in organizing employee communication? First thing is, you set a clear vision and goal. Set a clear vision for the future with the involvement and commitment of all the members of the organization. Second step is, be clear and concise. Overwriting and using technical jargon will lead to confusion and misunderstanding. You have to be very brief, very clear, and very concise. Then you create a dialogue and not a monologue. Monologue is when you only speak. You don't allow others to speak. Communication should function as method of engagement, not simply as a message of instruction. Wherever possible, facilitate personalized conversation and interaction. Next is foster a culture of transparency as possible. A communication strategy will fall short in corporate commitment if corporate commitment falls short. And success always starts at the top. An open door, transparent office culture builds employees' trust, respect for organization's mission and leaders, and ultimately the employee's satisfaction at work. Fifth one is, set the tone at the top. CEOs and senior leaders need to set up the tone. They need to be visible and accessible. They need to understand that there's a correlation between strategic employee communication and achievement of the organizational goals. The sixth one, understand your employees. You may need to communicate differently with different audiences. Consider surveying them regularly and ask whether they are getting the information they need. Seventh one, use many channels as possible. Now, most people need to hear or see message multiple times in multiple ways in order to understand it more clearly and completely. Distribute your message electronically, in writing, face-to-face, at meetings, and other ways. Your message should be consistent across all the channels. Next one is, you notify the employees first. When you prioritize your communication, always think of your internal people first. Your employees should hear it from you before they hear it from anybody else. Ninth one is, match actions with your words. Do what you say you are going to do. Be firm. Otherwise, you undermine your credibility and the employees are less likely to believe or take seriously all your future communication. 10th one is, emphasize face-to-face communication. Although today's employees may be more tech savvy than ever, nothing beats human interaction. Emphasize on face-to-face communication. 11th one is, communicate regularly. Be systematic and strategic. Create an editorial calendar with regular dates for communicating with your employees. Whether it's by newsletter, whether it's by email or by scheduling meeting. Communicate regularly with your employees. The 12th one, measure the effectiveness. Set objectives and assess whether you have met them. Ask employees whether the organization has communicated its strategy well or not. And the last one is facilitate conversation. One-way communication is a thing of the past. Employees who feel listened to have enhanced feeling of trust. There are many ways to facilitate a two-way communication, including face-to-face meetings, interactive videos, interviews, employee survey, question answers features on the employee's intranet, and anonymous suggestions via suggestion boxes. Yes, friends, I hope you have understood how will you organize employee communication. It's an important topic of this particular part. Let's turn out to what are the benefits of employee communication. What the organization is going to get by keeping the organization well communicated. Number one is engaged employees. If people are communicated to regularly and in an effective manner, they are much more engaged with the company and the team and have a more positive attitude towards their work and their customer. Now this is important. You keep your people engaged if you communicate with them regularly. You ensure consistency. If everyone understands what the company or the team is trying to achieve and their role within it, you will get a much more consistent approach and less tendency for people to come up with their interpretation of what they think something means. Promote two-way feedback. Regular and effective communication invite people to engage in discussion. Communication in a dialogue, and provide two-way feedback between management and employees, department and colleagues. This in turn promotes a culture of sharing ideas and knowledge, but also making these things happen. Next is ensure compliance with regulatory bodies. Effective communication and training information ensures that our employees are compliant with all the regulatory requirements and aware of all the company guidelines and the policies, or where to find them. They should know where are these things kept. Next, ensure common understanding of a strategy and goals. Employees understand how their work fits into bigger picture and what the team or the company as a whole is trying to achieve. Have an understanding of them. Make them understand the strategic goals of the organization. Next is promote a positive attitude towards change. People resist to change. How are you going to promote a positive attitude towards a change? Employees that are communicated to effectively around change, they respond much more positively, and if you don't communicate to them, they will resist to change. Communication can also identify champions within the company willing to help the change. Next we come up to increased productivity. Jobs are performed more effectively and efficiently when the employees have the information they need to do the job. Effective communication minimizes wasting time and misunderstanding, and it helps employees know what is expected of them. Next is improves identification. Effective communication strategies build a sense of identification between the employees in the business and the business. The employees who identify within the organization's value and goals are always loyal and hardworking. They preserve the company's image by presenting themselves in a way that shows the image of the company. Anything wrong done on their behalf is going to spoil the image of the company. This is what they know. Increase employee satisfaction. Effective communication fosters pleasant relationship in workplace, which promotes a positive business environment. Employees who are communicating well with one another, they feel more joy at work. And lastly, it increases customer satisfaction. When communication is effective at the workplace, the customers have a more satisfying experience doing business with the company. Top co-workers communicate professionally in front of your customers. In this way, it will increase the customer's satisfaction. Next we come up to what are the different steps in implementing an effective communication program. Next topic is steps in implementing an effective communication program. The first step is you have to review your current strategy. Before revamping your internal communication strategy, it is important to take stock of what currently is in place. Evaluate your current internal communication strategy to identify its strength and weaknesses. Second one is you have to define your audience, who your audience are. Before coming up with a plan for your internal communication, it is important to identify your audience. Most companies make the mistake of treating their employees at one large homogeneous demographic. No, this is problematic as different divisions of your company will want different things out of their communication channel. The third one is set your goals very clearly. It is important to have concrete goals and timelines in place to add some structure to your planning process. It is essential to follow the SMART formula, that is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Now, specific what? Your goals need to be concrete and not vague. Measurable what? Your goals must be quantifiable. Attainable what? Ensure that your goals are realistic with your current resources. Relevant what? Goals must be directly linked to your company's aspiration. Time bound. Your goals must have deadlines to keep yourself on the track. The fourth one is you define your new strategy. Now it's time to thrash out your vision for your new internal communication strategy. Your new internal communication strategy, what they should include? Clear goals, realistic timelines, ambassadors, internal communication solution, right content types, and effective content distribution. Fifth one is optimize your content distribution. Most employees feel overwhelmed by information overload. How do you make sure you minimize that workload while simultaneously ensuring that each employee gets the right information at the time? To help get your content distribution right, it is important to identify what you want your employees to do with your content. Next is you have to identify your ambassadors. It's important to establish the key shareholders in your organization who will act as promoters for your new internal communication strategy. Remember, passive company-wide mandates don't work for internal communication. If you want your new internal communication system to work, you need active participations from your employees. Identify individuals with influence in your organization who can spearhead the adoption process. This ensures easy assimilation and enables you to start measuring your progress quickly. Measure your progress. Once you have started implementing your new strategy, use a metric you have set up to evaluate whether your internal communication strategy meets the goals you have established earlier or not. Eighth one is you review your strategy on a regular basis. When it comes to internal communication, consistency is the key. Always conduct routine reviews to ensure that your internal communication strategy is working effectively. So these are your steps in implementing an effective communication program. What is the role of management in employee communication? Have face-to-face conversation. Second, keep the employees in a loop. Your employees want to feel like they should know what's going on in the company. Provide avenues for sounding off. Listening is important part of communicating with your employees. Remember, so to listen, you need to give your employees ways to provide feedback. Be approachable. There's always walls between employees and their superiors, and these walls hinder good communication. It's your job to break them down so your employees can feel comfortable approaching you. Act on what you hear. If you are not going to take any action when employees provide you with feedback, why bother talking to them in the first place at all? Communicate with union leaders. The communication between the employees and the union leaders should always be clear cut. The second last point is participative communication. Communication just does not mean instructing people about what to do and how to do it. It should be made entirely participative. Involvement and participation in the decision-making process leads to commitment. Train managers. The biggest obstacle to motivate the employees is lack of communication on its inappropriateness. The manager should be made this to understand. So you have to train the manager. So that brings to an end of your part B of unit number 3, that is your employee